to the Festival of the Future, to this lovely sunny day in Dorset. Thank you very much for joining us today. Please pop any comments into the chat bar as we go through. And don't forget to tweet about your experiences as within the festival. Please use the hashtag Futurefest, and then we'll be able to pick up on any tweets that you make and retweet and so on. Engage with you on Twitter. Lovely to see so many people joining us, 21 people so far. We've got Helena with us today. Helena from Microsoft. She's going to be talking about using technology as a platform for independent living. I'm going to mute myself and shut down my video. Helena, it's over to you, but I'll be here in the background.
Lovely.
So if anybody wants to ask questions, pop them in the chat bar, or Helena says she doesn't mind people chipping in as we go through, but probably best to wait till everybody's till she's finished and we have questions and answers at the end. So over to you, Helena.
Thank you, Penny. And yes, I'm sorry not to be with you in person as I was last year. We had a super discussion, but it is lovely to be joined by so many people online. So my name's Helena. I'm the social care lead at Microsoft, and I wanted to share with you today some thoughts about technology as a platform for independent living. And this is a topic that I get to spend quite a bit of time mulling over in my role at Microsoft. And I think it's been very interesting times for us recently, hasn't it? Really, the world has been turned upside down. Work is at home. It certainly is for me today. Thankfully, home is not at work; it's at school. But I know that for many of us working remotely at the moment, this has been a very real phenomenon as we've gone through the past number of months. On the one hand, the world is physically closed. But at the same time, for those of us fortunate enough to be able to enjoy the online world, it's very much been open. And I think, one of the things that we really need to bear in mind is that not everybody at this time is able to, enjoy the online world. It's not as good as the real world, but it's the one that we have at the moment. And I'll reflect on that a little later on in the presentation. Certainly during COVID times, we have observed some very rapid and quite remarkable innovation, and within the local government and certainly social care space, sometimes rapidity of innovation is not always what we see, but certainly during COVID times that has not been the case, and we've observed some tremendous agile, rapid development, people providing digital solutions to very real needs and issues being experienced by people up and down the country. And I'll share an example of that later in the presentation of Bury Council and work that they've done really in supporting vulnerable people, shielding people very swiftly with response from their local community, which I think is an excellent example of this. Anybody who listened to my presentation last year may have seen this slide, and I still think that there's a lot of truth in this. The most profound technologies are those that disappear. They weave themselves into the fabric of everyday lives until they're indistinguishable from it. And I think it's probably fair to say at the moment that technology has had a very profound effect on how we're living at the moment. It has become real life. One might say we've had a little bit too much of it, but I think that it's certainly, provided some real food for thought for all of us, actually, in terms of what good looks like, in terms of how we interact with technology as workers on the one hand, as consumers on the other, and certainly within the realm of how we deliver health and care services. The role of technology, imperfect in some instances, is absolutely governing our ability to be free at the moment. And I think this is certainly something that we we should reflect on as technologists. And I think if we think about, the future world, there are, of course, some really, really important lessons to learn. I've recently spent quite a lot of time with a super guy, Prof Todd, Chris Todd, who's a professor of primary care and community health up in Manchester. And he's been very good, honestly, at challenging, I suppose, the theories of technologists like me in making sure that when we think about the role of technology in our lives, as we, hopefully one day progress beyond COVID, but certainly while we're in it, what should it actually do for people? And it's really, his viewpoint that gave rise to the title of my presentation today. But, it is very critical when we think about technology, whether it's for older people, and this quote happens to be about older people, but it doesn't have to be about older people. It should first of all absolutely represent what the user group wants of that technology, and so it needs to take account of people's expectations, their values and their goals if it's going to be successful. But also it should really respect individual requirements, so it should respect what we want as people, as individuals, but it should support people in maintaining independence and autonomy. And I think it's very important when we think about technology design and the opportunities for digital in independent living, that we absolutely start from the point of view of what people need to make them independent, and also respect the fact that we're all individuals. And I spent some time, thinking about what it is we all want. And so this is a picture of my lovely mum on one of the beautiful beaches at Branksome in Dorset. And I think if I were to ask her what she wants of technology as she gets a little bit older, I think it's all about supporting her to keep healthy, to be independent, absolutely to be in control. But she also wants to be informed. She wants to be at the centre of discussions, and she wants for organisations involved in supporting her with her health and care to be joined up and be coordinated. In the middle, from a practitioner point of view, people want the information that they need to support people to live their best lives. And if they need help, they want to be able to help them early on before things become serious, so that hopefully they can send them back on their way to being independent, doing whatever it is they want to do, playing with their grandkids on the beach, rather than having them deteriorate. And on the right-hand side, from a system point of view, we want information that allows us to make the right decisions, to commission the right services, to improve people's health span, and of course access to service. And just a note on health span, the government's published a report from the all-party parliamentary group on healthy ageing, as an example, earlier on this year. And they make the point that there is a 20-year gap in health span between different CCGs, so clinical commissioning groups up and down the country. So that's a very substantial postcode lottery. We need to do a better job of intervening early on in people's unwellness, so that we can intervene. But what is it that underpins our ability to do this? And I would argue that our ability to deliver independence and personalisation to my mum on the one hand, to practitioners who want information so that they can support people effectively earlier, and indeed to those people who are running our health and care system, the underpinning factor is data. So I just want to talk a little bit about how we think about data. So the reality is that we live in a world at the moment of ubiquitous computing. And if this was true 12 months ago, it's ever more true on a day-by-day basis at the moment. Computing, smart devices are everywhere. And our expectations of those devices are that they're able to provide us with consistent experiences. So your experience of Netflix on your computer, knows where you're up to when you open Netflix, or Audible for that matter, on your phone. We want, of course, to be able to interact with the world, the virtual world, using multiple senses. So, using voice, using touch, or gestures for our physiotherapy, for example. That is absolutely an expectation that we have now. And a lot of this, of course, is driven by the Internet of Things phenomenon. So the phenomenon of smart devices, which are creating enormous amounts of data. But I think the key thing about Internet of Things devices is that they do provide a window on a very individual world, a moment by moment viewpoint on what's happening for individuals. And I think it's quite key that we reflect on that when we think about technology providing a platform for independent living. After all, if it's not tailored to us and about us, it's not going to support us in our very individual circumstances to be independent and able to go about our business as we see fit. At Microsoft, we call those smart devices the intelligent edge. And this is really the idea that you have devices operating across all sorts of different parts of your life, and monitoring and helping you really get about. So that might be it might be an autonomous vehicle, it might be a smartwatch, it might be a temperature checker or an oxygen meter. What unifies all of this, though, and a critical point, is that all of this information needs to be stored somewhere. Without it, we can't really deliver, as I've mentioned before, personalised services, but we also can't deliver anticipatory services that support people in their independent living goals. Clearly, from a practitioner's point of view, and from the point of view of the system, there is an awful lot of information flying around. And actually, those of you who've heard my colleague Ellen Wilson, who I think spoke immediately before me, will know that actually a lot of the data that we have at the moment we don't make use of. But certainly, we are living in a world of masses and masses of data, and the human brain was not designed to sift through that data, but artificial intelligence was. And those of you who've heard me speak before have probably heard me refer to this, particularly in the area of integrated health and care and independent living. I think we should think about artificial intelligence as a vehicle, a springboard, if you will, for assistive intelligence. I think that's a better way of framing it in these terms. We need to make use of this capability because there is so much information around, but what we do need to do is have it be assistive in our decision making rather than artificial. So just thoughts there. So Microsoft obviously has given quite a lot of thought to the role and potential for data and digital within the social care system. And we think that it's absolutely critical, as I've mentioned several times, to provide choice for people. So it does provide us with an ability to personalise things, but it also provides us with the ability to choose and make choices about what's right for us as individuals, what's right from the point of view of our loved ones if we're no longer able to make those decisions, but also to prioritise. That's clearly a very, very important thread. In fact, probably the most important thread when we're thinking about independent living. It can also provide some of the coordination capability that we've spoken about previously. Now, at the moment, many different bits of the health and care system operate in quite a separate way, but actually the ability for them to come together using platforms like the one we're using now to actually make sure that they're able to deliver coordinated experiences that support people to live independent lives is key. I've mentioned the business of strategic and operational insights, but we need, if we want to be anticipatory about how we deliver health and care services and help people before they get too sick, we need to be able to form a view as to what's happening for individuals, so that we can both commission better care, but also provide better operational insights, better services, more responsive services. A key point clearly is how we share that information, and it's as an aside, it's been very interesting to see, and we're very excited about the national debate that's really been arising, from a COVID point of view, as we all think about our tolerance for sharing our information for the greater good. We absolutely welcome that dialogue, and we hope that as a society we will learn more about not only the shortcomings but also the benefits of sharing information through this experience. And the last point really is that we're very keen on innovation in the social care space, in the independent living space, and I'll provide you with a couple of examples. I know that there has been a fantastic presentation today around cobotics, which is a really fantastic example of this. But we think that there is other innovation which is more data driven as well, which I'd like to share with you today. So a couple of examples of that. This is a story from Cardiff Council, but there are a number of other organisations that have been involved with a company called Hastech, who have a product called ARMED, which stands for Advanced Risk Modelling for Early Detection. And what this is a suite of gadgets that allow you not only to understand if somebody has had a fall or become more frail, but quite importantly to understand whether or not their risk of having such an incident has increased. And I think that's a really good example actually of technology supporting people to be more independent, because once you've had a fall, or worse still, a number of falls, the chances are that you are going to really struggle from a health point of view, and the outcomes of people who've had a successive number of falls are really very poor. So the earlier that we can intervene, the better. And I think this is a really exciting example of digital at its best, so in anticipatory form. The next example that I want to share is a COVID related example. So Bury Council and a number of other councils up in Manchester, and indeed a number of others up and down the country, looked to a very swift digital response to support the needs of people shielding during the COVID response, and indeed other people who felt that they needed help and support with day-to-day living during COVID response. So whether that was making sure that they had enough food in the fridge, making sure that pharmacy prescriptions had been picked up, etc. And so Bury, together with an IT company called A&S, produced an app, both to support people in reporting needs, so to ask for help, but also to support the local community in delivering against that help. So I'm sure it's been the case in Dorset, certainly been the case in Reading, where I am today. During COVID, we've seen this tremendous groundswell of neighbourliness and people really wanting to support others in their local community. And I think this is a really good example of supporting people in very strange circumstances to be independent, to live in their own homes and be as self-sufficient as they can be at a time when they couldn't cross the threshold. So again, there I think a really compelling example, and actually something that Bury Council's very keen to continue with when COVID is hopefully either less troublesome or even better still, a distant memory. And the last example I want to share is from Bristol City Council, who've been working with an organisation called Intelligent Eye, all about how they get a better understanding for what is happening with their children's services provision, so that they can identify trends in that data, so that they can spot people and children and families who require greater support from statutory services, but also so that they can make sure that statutory services are teaming up to deliver that joined up experience for families, and that effort is not being duplicated. So again, I think a really good example of how data can really start to make a difference in people's lives. So we've spoken a lot about digital, and certainly those of us who are information workers, are very fortunate to have devices at home with us. But that's not necessarily the case for everybody. And whilst I'm very optimistic about the role of technology in delivering independence, it's very important that we don't leave anybody behind in this. And certainly there is a great risk with digital, that it can provide, or it can take away as much as it provides, and that it can exacerbate the digital divide. So this is an article that I came across, charities warning of the devastating effect as the most vulnerable households are left without access to the web, and with it attendant access, certainly during lockdown times, to school provision, to the ability to connect with others, to the ability in some instances to report safeguarding concerns, report domestic violence concerns, and the figure quoted here is 1.9 million. So certainly this is something that we take very seriously at Microsoft, and we've been really delighted to see organisations like Dorset really making the most of their digital hotline during this time. And I know that's very close to your heart, Penny. I think that's your that's your baby there. But also up in Scotland, similarly, they've repurposed to a degree their Connecting Scotland programme to look at making sure during this time in particular that they're making sure that people have access both to devices but also to digital infrastructure to support them. So we absolutely think, if we're thinking about technology in the context of independent living, we certainly can't be assuming that everybody has access to that technology off pat. So I'll leave it there and would really welcome any questions. I'm going to stop presenting so that I can see your lovely faces. I can get my act together here. There we go.
Thank you so much, Helena. That's really inspiring to hear some of those examples. We're doing some of those things in Dorset. We are joining up our data with health data with the Dorset Care Record and
Yeah.
increasingly the Wessex Care Record, and also the CCG have developed a new platform called DICE, which is around sharing demographic data to be able to overlay various different bits of data to pull out greater understanding and insight into what people need. But really nice to see those examples from elsewhere as well. Thanks also for giving a shout out to the hotline. Yes, we have been busy with that in Dorset to replace the face-to-face sessions that we used to run for our digital champions to help people in the community. And actually, we've also got a couple of projects running, trying out giving devices to people or loaning devices to people, or exploring what sort of devices or help people might want in order to get online for the first time, because we realise that motivations have changed during lockdown. And we've got Brian on the call, so I don't know, Brian, if you want to pop in with any more on your project. But let's first of all see if anybody's posted any questions. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Would anybody like to put their hand up and ask a question? Or just unmute yourself and
fire away.
Fire away. That's good. I'm going to pop you in the spotlight. There we are.
Heck. I'm not sure everybody needs to see me in quite such large form.
Oh, I don't know why not. But if anybody wants to come in with any questions, we've got a comment there. Let's just have a look and see what Nathan's saying. There's clearly power in using data and analytics to target, support and provide proactive interventions. The difficulty for services is knowing when to step forward using data and who should check the data. What's your experience of who views the data?
Look, I think that's in a way that's the golden question. From a technology point of view, there are some very clever tools that can make sure that the right people have access to the right information and for a particular time. But I think in terms of information governance practices, that's something that needs to sit with practitioners. Us technologists can set it up how you need it to be. But I do think, it also reflects on an emerging, or and to a certain extent burgeoning national conversation about our information and how it's used as we're checking in left, right and centre using the NHS app. I do think that there is a balance to be struck between privacy and us all appreciating that we will have a better experience of health and care services and many other services for that matter if we're happy sharing our information. But I think we also need to bring in the digital skills angle there as well. So, and people need to understand and I think get a bit more serious about terms and conditions that we all kind of tick and say, move on, I just want to buy this thing. What are the implications of that and how that information is shared? So, it is absolutely the trickiest bit. Technology is the easy bit. I don't think there are any silver bullets around information governance.
I was in a session yesterday with a local guy actually who's working with the Rwandan and Ethiopian governments on data and how they manage their data and data projects. I think it was agricultural rather than health data as a matter of fact, but still very interesting. So he took the approach of getting all the stakeholders in the room with post-it notes for the first country that he was dealing with. But for the second country, he was dealing with it in lockdown, and so trying to understand what their requirements were in terms of policy and guidance, governance and so on, was really hard to do remotely when he was in a completely different country, sitting in his Piddle-Trentide front room and trying to deal with these people who were out in the middle of Africa. But he found a way, and that was really key, and having the people and the stakeholders there and part of that governance, so that things weren't being done to them, but that they had a stake in it.
Absolutely. That we individuals need to have a debate, a national debate, a local debate, also led by local institutions about how information is shared. And Penny, you're absolutely right to call out the great work that's happening in Dorset. I had the joy of seeing some of your work presented by one of your health colleagues a week or so ago, and it's fantastic to see that for the benefit of citizens, health and care institutions are finding a way through this.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for that. So Mazine says great session, and she or he has left her LinkedIn profile, so that's good to see. We'll check that out later. Scott says, you mentioned about data poverty. How do we encourage organisations to foot the bill initially or forever to make tenants' lives better? Scott, I wonder if you're from a housing association perhaps, or something like that, are you? Do you want to unmute yourself and say a bit more about your question?
Hi, we're from a housing association, and we've been looking at providing internet in our sheltered schemes. We currently offer it in our communal lounges. Right. Having priced it up for the whole schemes, in order to retrofit is incredibly expensive.
Right.
And it's more of how can you I guess do a business case, or how can you speak to senior management to say, look, in the long term this is going to be a benefit, and where does that money come from? Because this issue was just come out of the air, so no one's ready in regards to funding for it.
Yeah, look, Scott, I think it's really, really critical. And there are people who say that, broadband access should be a human right. It's an essential service, if you will, and certainly in today's times that's the case. Gosh, business cases is a knotty old issue, but I think what probably part of what needs to be done there is to find a compelling other reason other than the very critical reason of access for people who are living in your settings, to make sure that there are other compelling reasons to have it there, and that might be about providing better information about what's happening with your so that you can do a better job, get on the front foot of some of those other things that provide big costs. But clearly, dialogue with developers and getting developers to build things from the ground up in that way is one way of tackling that for newer settings.
Yes, thanks, Scott, for raising that, and thanks, Helena. So De Bono says, hello, is there a central location UK-wide where all these valid initiatives are listed? And maybe included in that would be sort of business case examples and that sort of thing as well, so that we can access. I've seen £1 in, £15 out in terms of investment in digital inclusion, but being able to see different business cases and what people have
what people have done.
Yes,
it's a brilliant point. So I know that the LGA was looking at that. The Local Government Association was looking at that from a local gov point of view, and certainly where innovation funding has been provided, it should be possible to get some of that underlying information out. But I think generally as a sector, we could do a better job of sharing not only the lovely story, but actually how did you finance it? What's the ROI? And I think I don't know that I have the answer for that, but I would look to organisations like the LGA and others to support on that kind of topic.
Yes, LGA, definitely a good one. Okay, what good examples of measuring social impact exist to support the case for these systems? What type of Microsoft tech or applications play a large part in these to date?
Right, I don't know if that's two questions or one question.
I think it is, yes, two.
Okay. So on the social impact front, look, it's a really, really fantastic question. We take it really seriously. We've thought long and hard about it. Some of you may see my colleague Lee Jones talking about Microsoft's work around digital skills. So for us, we see the opportunity and the tremendous benefit of the digital world, but we're very conscious that we need to make sure that everybody can join in, and whether that's people who perhaps are living in poverty and therefore don't have the, or it's people who are sadly losing traditional jobs at the moment and needing to reskill. We feel that we have a role to play there, and that's what our digital skills initiative is all about. There are other things that we do, apprenticeship schemes and a whole heap of other things. So I could kind of go into that in a lot of detail. In terms of the Microsoft stack in this space, we see digital innovation happening around the theme of independent living across all three of the Microsoft clouds. So mostly around our Azure cloud, which is our data repository, cloud capability, if you will, but also across our business applications toolkit and indeed our modern work toolkit, which we're using today.
Yes, thank you. And we have a session actually going on right now. It's just started on the other channel with more information about Microsoft's skills package. So if you want to, once we've finished here, obviously not until we've finished here, pop across there. You can learn more about that in just a sec.
Any
Another
more?
question from Scott. Are there digital monitoring questions you believe would be best asked in order to measure true or good impact? I find organisations always ask different questions, so find it so hard to measure against. A lot about measuring, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. I guess I'm interested, when you say digital monitoring, are you thinking about IoT devices, Scott, and those sorts of things, or did you have something else in mind?
Yeah, so it's either or really, whether it be digital support or the use of assisted tech. What I find whenever we've tested things, we'll use our own questions, which have kind of just plucked out of the air almost. And so I think other organisations do something similar. So what I'd like to see is almost a standardised set of questions, whether it be through digital support or assisted digital, so on, that all organisations can use, and they've got benchmark against each other.
So it's a really super point, Scott. And I did see Nathan Downing from the TSA was on the line earlier, but I can't see him anymore. Otherwise, I might have asked him to get involved in that one. Look, I think that there's definitely something about, of course, kite marking. I don't think I can say this. Kite marking and quality assurance around around these gadgets, if I can use that as a shorthand for these sorts of devices. I think it would be really interesting though also, as you say, there's such a profusion of them around. How do you decide what's good? What questions should you be asking of them? And I think in a way, Scott, that's a very big question that I can't fully answer here, obviously. But I think one of the things that you need to be clear on when you're thinking about is it any good is, what are you looking to measure? How often do you need to know that information? How critical is it that you have that information at a particular point in time, and some of those sorts of things. But I agree with you that some kind of repository does seem like a good idea. I think the TSA would probably be a good organisation to look to provide that, and in fact they may do already. But Brian is still on the line. I don't know whether Brian might want to comment on that, because he's absolutely an expert in that field, I know.
Well, we have. Oh, go on, Brian. You go for it.
I was just going to support what Helen was saying. There are a number of ways of monitoring it, and yeah, Nathan, I do know has got his own framework, or TSA have got a framework that they advocate. We've developed a number of ways of monitoring the solutions that we're piloting at the moment. And as you say yourself, Scott, quite often we do pluck out questions and things out of the air that probably we try and mould to our own outcomes that we're trying to achieve. But yeah, a standard model is or would be really useful.
And I think the other thing, Scott, is, kind of back to where we started in a sense, we need to make sure that when we're using these gadgets, not only are they delivering what we need from a kind of system and an institutional point of view, but really, really critically, otherwise people won't use them. Are they helping people to be in control of their lives, to be more independent? And even if you're thinking about like a passive monitoring scenario in a building, what is that doing for the individual who's living in that setting? Is it helping them to better manage their cash because they're doing a better job of managing their energy consumption? Is it a gadget that means that they're, because it's encouraging them to exercise regularly, means that they're in a better state to play with their grandchildren, because that's what really motivates them. And I think we probably do not a bad job of asking institutional questions or questions of these, these gadgets that relate to business cases and things. But actually, we need to spin it on its head also and be really firm about asking ourselves the question: what do the end users, if you will, or the people who we are, monitoring, in the nicest possible way, what's in it for them? I think that's the question we need to keep at the forefront of our minds as well.
Thank you. And we've got one final question, I think. What measures, if any, are you taking to ensure that these systems don't become obsolete within months and that they continue to deliver value over the long term? This is especially important when people come to rely on the support and services that are delivered digitally.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, look, I think that's where cloud computing and what is known in the industry as software as a service comes in. So it's the idea that you subscribe to an IT service, and unbeknownst really to the user in the back end, it is being updated all the time, and therefore you're always on the latest and greatest version, which means it's secure. Also means you're getting your hands on the latest and greatest innovation. I think where we're thinking about that question in the context of kind of super cool new gadgets and the like, this is really where having an integrated view of data becomes very important. So, we should update our offering to people with the latest and greatest gadgets, but what we ought to be able to do is to put that information together with other things that we know about people, but also to be able to add on new offerings over time and still have our system view, not technical system, but our system, i.e. our health and care system view, salient and able to take on new things all the time. Because the reality is, as Brian will know, this market evolves incredibly quickly, and we should embrace that actually, because these things really can support us to be much more healthy and independent. We need to be open to to new things coming on, but we need to make sure that the way that the system handles that information is able to take on new information from new sorts of gadgets and devices, and not operate these things in silos.
Yeah, the mantra that we've adopted in the robotics has been to dream big, but start small and scale fast.
Yeah.
So
great.
Well, thank you. I think that brings us to the end of our questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks for everyone. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the questions, everyone, as well. There was some tough ones there.
Some good questions. Yeah, really good questions.
Yeah.
Don't forget to pop any views or comments in the chat bar. We'll keep on having a look at it, or tweet using the hashtag Futurefest. A few more sessions for you to catch up on, including Lee over on the other channel talking about skills right now. So if you want to hop across there and find out more about what Microsoft is doing, I'll see you over there shortly. But thanks again, Helena. Absolutely great presentation, and lovely to see you again.
And likewise, and as I say, hopefully next year in person again.
Yeah.
Anyway, take care, everyone. Thank you so much to everybody for listening and for your questions.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Helena.